Abandoned Northwest Florida. Commonly referred to as the Panhandle, Northwest Florida is an estimated 200-mile-long strip of land that borders Alabama, Georgia, and the Gulf of Mexico. Parts of Northwest Florida includes Pensacola, which was the first European settlement in the United States. It was settled by the Spanish in 1559 and was the state capital up until 1821. After settlers from Georgia and Alabama made their way to Northwest Florida, it became a predominantly rural area until after World War II. What started as an area with fishing, farming, and mills soon became an area with a military presence. It was in 1935 that the largest military installation in the United States was built in the Fort Walton Beach area. Because of the sugar white sands and emerald clear waters, Northwest Florida has become a major tourist destination. Whether it's spring breakers during the months around March, families in the summer, or snowbirds in the winter, the Panhandle is a highly sought-after place to be. This doesn't mean everything's picture perfect and there aren't plenty of areas for urban exploration. In fact, one of the places is steeped in dark history. Others are simply forgotten or left behind by fleeing homeowners or defunct businesses. In abandoned Northwest Florida, I take a look at the bittersweet beauty of what's left behind. So Bellamy Bridge is this historic bridge located in Marion, Florida, and it is actually one of the oldest bridges in Florida and oldest of its type. So now it's a historic site that you can walk down. There's about a mile walk for you to get in there, but along the way they have places to sit, and if I'm not mistaken, there was information that you could read about the bridge. I'm not positive on that, but it seems like there was. But it's just a walk through the woods and just go on a nice fall day or something where it's not so hot and there are mosquitoes. And depending on what time of year you go, as you can see in these pictures, or in this picture it was flooded, there'd been a lot of rain, so everything is a little muddy or whatever, but it is worth the trip just to see it. Plus, Bellamy Bridge is supposedly haunted. It is one of the most well-known haunted areas in Florida, and there's this ghost story about an 18-year-old named Elizabeth Jane Croom Bellamy. And there's a legend about it, and part of it's true. We don't know how much is, obviously, for the haunting and that kind of thing, but she was getting married to her true love, and he built this mansion for her, which is the site where the Bellamy Bridge is located. Of course, the mansion's long gone. But anyway, after the ceremony, she went to her room to rest and supposedly caught her wedding dress on fire by knocking over a candelabra that was lit. So she ran down the stairs with her dress on fire to the shock of her wedding guests, and they tried to save her, and supposedly her last words that I will always love you forever and never will I leave you, or something similar. Anyway, her husband committed suicide 15 years later, and she came back to find him and still shows up at the Bellamy Bridge. I don't know how much of that is true, but there are a lot of paranormal events that take place there often, especially around Halloween. So I'm not sure if they're still doing it right now, but that's something you could check into because they will have get-togethers there. And anyway, it's an interesting place, and it's well worth the drive over there to check it out. There are a lot of abandoned things out at the Eglin Air Force Base Reservation. It's not physically on the base, this aircraft, but there's a plane, there's some Jeeps, all kinds of things out there. It's a pretty big field. And this one is on the reservation, but not physically on the base. You need a recreational permit to get to see it, and then you'd have to find it as well, because, like I said, it is huge, and it may be hard to find, but you can look online and find out exactly where this plane is located. What happened was this plane is actually from 1968, or the crash was in 1968, where a combat crew training wing crashed on approach to Duke Field about a half a mile from its runway threshold. There were about 6 men killed there, and the witnesses said that the control tower reported plane was circling the field making practice landings, and it was in a landing pattern when it suddenly turned off as it approached the runway and never came out of the flight. But that's a very interesting thing. I mean, considering this plane has been out there for, 52 years? So I find that incredibly interesting. And like I said, there's other things out there too. It might be worth getting a permit and checking things out or doing some research first. And because that's a safe place you can go and explore, but you might want to know where everything is first. Now, this is located in Destin, and it varies on whether it's abandoned or not when you go. It has been bought and sold with multiple owners, and at sometimes it'll be up and running and open, and other times it looks like it does in these pictures in the book. It's really beautiful, even though it's abandoned. The pool, if it's been rainy, is full. There's graffiti inside and all, and that has probably since been removed because it was bought after these pictures. But the last time I looked at it, it was abandoned again. Now this is just one example of an abandoned home. This one in particular happens to be pre-Hurricane Michael out in the Southport area, so I don't even know if this one's still standing, but you can drive around any area of Northwest Florida or the Gulf Coast and find abandoned homes. You just have to be on the lookout for them, especially down roads like, Highway 77 and Highway 20. Any direction you go, especially in those kind of more rural areas, just look on either side and you'll see these homes and businesses that are sitting just like this and look like this, and probably more so after the hurricane, but some of the abandoned homes I've found, weren't even in this area. They're still in Northwest Florida, but they're further away, so they're just sitting just like this and look quite beautiful like this one. You always wonder what kind of thing happened. Were there, why did the people leave? Did the people pass away and no one claimed it, or there were no heirs, or did someone run from something? There's always a story behind each of the homes that you see, and any of the businesses, but the homes are a little bit more fascinating because they have a personal story behind them. This has to be one of my favorite, if not the favorite. This was a highlight place that was pretty popular back in the 70s, maybe early 80s, and when we went, it was just amazing. There are bats inside everywhere. The stadium area where the games were played, all you have to do is just point your flashlight or your camera or whatever up, and there's bats everywhere. It's awesome. There's graffiti everywhere. But what is kind of neat is there's a lot of office buildings or office rooms in there, and there's paperwork and building plans, and there are even stuffed animals from where they had prizes, I guess. Maybe they had machines for kids, I'm not sure, but a lot of stuffed animals were everywhere. And at one point before we went, I saw some pictures of people who had gone, and there were still liquor bottles from where they had the drinks that they sold, and they still had liquor in them. But when we went, there weren't any, so I'm assuming other people who had been in there first had, taken it or whatever. But there were still condiments in there. There were still bathroom tissue in the bathrooms, even though the sinks, some of them were broken. It was just amazing. Now, we didn't go upstairs only because it probably wasn't safe, because, these buildings being rotted and decrepit, you don't know. Some people probably would go upstairs, but we didn't feel safe. There was the escalator. We tried to film what we could upstairs without actually going there, just to be safe. We did feel not so alone out there, because being out there by itself would probably be really creepy, but it actually, when we went, it was a staging area for some of the Hurricane Michael workers, so they weren't in the building or anything, but they were parked out back, so it wasn't quite as lonely or if something happened, you knew there were people around that you could ask for help. So that made it even cooler. But there's broken glass everywhere. All the front glass is out. It was just an amazing place. We stayed there quite a while and got so many pictures that aren't even in the book. I mean, I've just got tons of gorgeous pictures from there. So that has to be one of my favorites. This is located in Port St. Joe, and from what I understand, it is something that they plan on selling and starting up again, but as of this date, I'm not sure if that ever went through, especially after a storm now. That had probably changed a few things unless it's already been sold. But it's a pretty cool place. There, as you can see from the title, it's a train depot, but it's pretty big. There's a shop area that's abandoned. You can see the pumps and everything. There's just a lot of land that you can walk around and take pictures and look. So I found this one pretty fascinating. It's a good day trip to check out. And I said, I'm not sure if it's still abandoned, but I would imagine it is. This was incredibly fascinating. These pictures we got before probably any of the others. This is a place in Quincy, Florida, I believe. It is actually ran by a gentleman who has all those cars, and they're just sitting out there rusting. And you can tell by the pictures, it just turned out they almost look like toy cars, but they're really fascinating. We got a lot of pictures from inside, and there's always people there. It's just sitting beside the road so that anybody can stop by, and you can walk through the woods and see that it leads to like the people who own it. It's their home and area, and there are a few more relics out in the woods, but that's the main thing. There is all the cars, and again, they're just sitting there. People stop by. It's usually crowded when you go, and people stop by, take pictures, look at the cars, and it's just really cool. I always find the car graveyards really fascinating, and this one didn't disappoint. This is just one example of the many boats that I put in the book, and I find these equally fascinating, much like homes, because you have to wonder like where the boat came from. And I realize a lot of times you have a boat that was docked or whatever, and there's a storm and it breaks free and it travels. But you'll hear stories of a boat traveling from, I think there was one recently that was originally in Tampa and washed up here locally, and that's just incredibly fascinating. I'm sure it's not especially great for the owners. Some of them don't care, and maybe they set it free. I've heard of that, and let it get washed up or whatever. No one claims it, and they can get rid of it. But a lot of times, people, that's their property, and it just so happened, due to the weather or whatever, that they lost it, and then they have to pay a big fee to get it picked back up or put back to sea. And some of them they can't, it's too damaged or whatever. But I just find them really neat. Even though we live in modern times, I mean, there's it's not a ship, but like a shipwreck, even though it's a smaller boat, but it's still really neat. Like I said, they do usually pick those up. They don't stay there forever because they would be a hazard, but it's just pretty cool thinking that they could, just like a washed up ship, just sit there forever. So I especially love the boats. So I dedicated this book to all the explorers out there, the people who look at what most people would ignore, people who use their imagination, create stories behind every abandoned building, boat, or other type of forgotten area. Now you can find abandoned Northwest Florida anywhere that sells books, but some of the local ones you can find at Books A Million, at the Bay County Library. And anywhere books are sold, you should be able to find it and check it out for yourself.
What inspired you to start this project?
Well, I have been taking pictures of abandoned buildings for a few years now. I've always found them fascinating, even before any of this. And what had happened is I had collected quite a few through the years and decided to put them together. And I started with a website called Abandoned Gulf Coast. Facebook came along. I eventually got a page on there, same name, Abandoned Gulf Coast. And it became a little popular. I mean, it's not, I don't have tens of thousands of people, but, I have a few thousand. And I would add most of my new pictures there and whatever. Well, long story short, I was approached by a publisher about doing a book on the abandoned. It seems that they have a series of abandoned or urban exploration books, and they approached me about doing one, and the rest is history. It's been a whirlwind of fun, getting things together, going through all my pictures or even taking new ones, and sharing in an actual book all the information and some of my favorite areas and pictures. So that's how I got started with this book, and here we are.